I am presenting Union Gospel Presses Sunday School Lesson number 11, Sunday, February 14th, 2020. The lesson is entitled Jesus' Response to a Dire Need. Lesson text comes from John chapter 11, verses 1 through 16. Related scriptures are 1 Corinthians 15, 12 through 19, Matthew 9, 18 through 26. The place is Perea, east of Jordan River. The time is 30 AD. The Gospel of John is especially designed to help the reader go deeper with Jesus. We have already seen Jesus' identity as the light of the world and his claim to deity. Today we will explore John 11, 1 through 16, and discover that Jesus is also a compassionate friend when we are in need. Today's aim. Facts. To observe Jesus' compassion and ready willingness to serve others. Principle. To understand Jesus' response to the dire need of his friends. Application. To emulate Jesus' deeds of love and compassion for the glory of God. Illustrating the lesson. As we continue to follow Jesus as his disciples, we realize that he does not intend to spare us from the difficulties and dangers of this life. Clinging to Jesus is much like clinging to a lifesaver in the middle of a treacherous sea. If we hold on tightly to that lifesaver, it has the power to keep us from drowning. The lifesaver is the only thing keeping us alive. Similarly, if we hold on to Jesus, no matter how difficult our life gets, he will save us through it all. Practical points. 1. Because of human sin, no one escapes sickness and death. John 11, 1 through 3. 2. God uses unlikely things such as death to bring himself glory. Verse 4. 3. The Lord works on his timetable. We should not insist he works on ours. Verses 5 through 6. 4. The things we should not deter us from the things we know God has for us to do. Verses 7 through 8. 5. We need the light of God to perceive things in a spiritual way and accomplish his purposes. Verses 9 through 13. 6. Sometimes God allows us to experience difficulty in life in order to increase our faith. Verses 14 through 16. Golden text. Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. John 11, 11. Today we have 3 lesson outlines. The first is Jesus summons, coming from John 11, 1 through 4. The second is Jesus delayed, John 11, 5 through 14. And the third is Jesus determined, John 11, 15 through 16. Introduction. He was in Florida and she was in Montana, helping her sister take care of their dying father. When their father went to be with the Lord, she informed her husband that the family wanted him there and would pay for a plane ticket. He arrived in Seattle and then had to take a small commuter plane to Yakima, Washington, where the funeral services was to be held 2 days later. Unfortunately, he arrived in a raging rainstorm and it continued the following 2 days. For some reason, as he was halfway to the car, he decided to go back into the house and get his Bible, even though he rarely took it to funerals. 10 minutes before the service was to start, he knew why he had felt prompted to get it. One of the sisters came to him and said, "The pastor scheduled to do the service is not able to come. Can you do the service for us?" Reminded by the spirit of the passage on Lazarus, he brought assurance of the future resurrection. Jesus summoned, John 11, 1. Now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Verse 2. It was that Mary, which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Verse 3. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. Verse 4. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Lazarus and his sisters, John 11, 1 through 2. John records 7 miracles in his gospel that proclaim the deity of Jesus Christ, changing water into wine in 2, 1 through 11, healing a sick boy from afar in 4, 46 through 54, healing an invalid at the pool of Bethesda in 5, 1 through 18, then feeding of over 5,000 people in 6, 5 through 14, walking on the Sea of Galilee in 6, 16 through 21, healing of a man blind from birth in 9, 1 through 7, and culminating here in the resurrection of Lazarus. Jesus had demonstrated his power and authority over the laws of nature, disease, and hunger. Here he demonstrates his authority over our greatest enemy, death. The town was Bethany, located about 2 miles east of Jerusalem on the road to Jericho, at the home of a family consisting of 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, and their brother Lazarus. This particular Lazarus is not mentioned in the Synoptic Gospels. Luke's Lazarus is a beggar featured in a parable in 16:20 through 21. So John makes certain to identify him as the brother of these 2 sisters. His name is a variant of the name Eleazar, which means he whom God helps. Jesus had been in Jerusalem, John 10:22 through 23. But because of opposition, he had retreated to the other side of the Jordan River into the area of Perea, where John the Baptist had baptized, verse 40. While he was there, Lazarus fell sick. John further identifies Lazarus as the brother of the Mary who had anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, 11:2, an incident he would record in chapter 12, verses 3 through 8. The sickness, John 11:3 through 4. It was undoubtedly when the sisters saw Lazarus' sickness getting worse that they thought of Jesus and how he might intervene. They had seen his miracles and knew by now what he could do, so they had confidence that he could also remedy this current crisis. They sent word to him, asking him to come and help. Their reference in verse 3 to Lazarus as he whom thou lovest indicates that Jesus and Lazarus must have had a special friendship. Jesus' response was encouraging. This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Verse 4. Jesus' apparent downplaying of Lazarus' illness is surprising, for it certainly was serious, but that was not his point. He was indicating that he felt no sense of urgency in getting to Lazarus. We now understand, of course, that he was actually waiting for Lazarus to die before he arrived, but those with him were not aware of his plan. Meanwhile, in Bethany, the sisters were waiting eagerly for Jesus to come. No doubt they expected him to respond quickly because of his fondness for their brother and the direness of the situation. Here was a need that only Jesus could feel, and they felt confident in his response. Their faith was strong, so they did not even make a specific request of Jesus. They simply informed him of the situation. Jesus delayed. Verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Verse 6. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Verse 7. Then after that saith he to his disciples, Let us go unto Judea again. Verse 8. His disciples say unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? Verse 9, Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. Verse 10, But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. Verse 11, These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Verse 12, Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Verse 13, Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking of rest in sleep. Verse 14, Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. The delay. John 11:5-6. John makes a point of telling us that Jesus loved all three members of this family. The word translated loved is the Greek word agape, usually referring to love that is self-sacrificial, always willing to put others first. John tells us this to assure us that Jesus' delay in responding to the sister's plea indicated no callousness on his part toward Mary, Martha, or Lazarus. Despite hearing of Lazarus' sickness, Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. This indeed seems a very strange response to such an urgent and desperate need. How could the compassionate Messiah ignore the legitimate needs of one of his favorite families? As in many of our own trying experiences of life, the answer lay in a simple but sweeping principle, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Jesus had a bigger purpose in mind than merely healing a sick friend. Jesus knew all about the suffering his friends must have been going through as he tarried. He also empathized with them in their suffering, verses 35-36. Jesus always had compassion for those in need. His reason for delaying was not unconcern, but rather to ensure the fulfillment of a greater purpose than anyone at the time could have realized. He had arrived immediately. He surely could have healed Lazarus' sickness, but by delaying, he was preparing the way for an even greater intervention. By allowing time for Lazarus to die, Jesus set the stage for the greatest of his 7 miracles in John's Gospel. Remember this the next time you cry out to Jesus for help, but he does not seem to respond. It may well be that he has in mind something more wonderful and glorious than you could ever imagine. A puzzling decision. John 11:7-8. After the 2-day delay, Jesus announced to the disciples, Let us go into Judea again, verse 7. This was surely a surprise to them, as seen in their response to him. Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? Verse 8. This was an expression of fear and dismay. As far as the disciples were concerned, it was dangerous for Jesus to go again into the vicinity of Jerusalem. It seemed like a foolish idea to them. Jesus' decision to return to Jerusalem area in Judea seemed foolhardily to the disciples, who reminded him that the Jews there had recently tried to stone him. 10:31-39. They obviously did not yet appreciate the Father's protection of his Son until his appointed hour, or the inevitability of Jesus' death. Since Jesus loved Lazarus and his sisters, it would seem that, humanly speaking, he would have wanted to go to Bethany immediately. Apparently, the Father restrained him. Jesus' timing was perfect, since it was guided and directed by the Father. God is there to help us in any situation at just the right time in accordance with his purposes. A curious response, John 11:9-10. As he often did, Jesus answered his disciples' question with a question of his own, a rhetorical one. Our first impression of this question may be that It had nothing to do with the disciples' concerns. He simply asked if there are not 12 hours in a day. Then he went on to explain that if someone walks in the light of the day, he will not stumble. But if he walks in the darkness, he is at great risk of stumbling. What did this have to do with the danger he was about to put himself in? Jesus meant that as long as he walked in the light of his Father's will, he was safe and protected from danger. Even though there had been threats against his life when he was previously in Judea, those threats were meaningless until the time came for him to lay down his life as the sacrifice for the sins of the world. He was willing, therefore, to return to Jerusalem, and he went without fear. It would only be when his earthly work was done that anyone could have such power over him. 19:11. We too are in the safest place possible when we are living within God's will. Staying obedient to him is equivalent to walking in the light, while living in disobedience allows spiritual darkness to invade our lives. We are told that darkness is not only an entity of its own, but merely the absence of light. There is power in light, but not in darkness. When the part of the earth that we are on rotates away from the sun, we are covered in darkness. Likewise, when we turn from God, spiritual darkness envelops us. It cannot touch us when we walk in his light. Sleeping Lazarus, John 11:11 through 14. Jesus then said, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Verse 11. He meant that Lazarus had now previously died. This was a common figure of speech used by Jesus. Matthew 9:24, Mark 5:39, Luke 8:52. The Apostle Paul used this expression frequently in discussing the Lord's Supper. For example, he writes, For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. 1 Corinthians 11:30. With reference to the coming rapture, he writes, Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. At the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. 15:51 through 52. In his discussion of the rapture in 1 Thessalonians, he says, But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. 4:13 through 14. The disciples missed Jesus' figurative reference completely. Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. John 11:12. In other words, the disciples thought that sleep would help Lazarus to recover from his illness, so why wake him up? John explains to the reader that Jesus was referring to Lazarus being dead. But the disciples thought he meant Lazarus was just taking a nap. It made no sense to them for Jesus to travel back to a place where his life was in danger if all he was going to do was wake a sick man up from a needed nap. They must have felt thoroughly confused. In the Old Testament scriptures, the word sleep was also a common metaphor for death. But the idea of coming back from death had been unknown since the miracles of Elisha. 2 Kings 4:32 through 35. Jesus himself had previously raised the daughter of Jairus from death. Mark 5:22 through 23, 35 through 42. But the disciples made no connection here with that incident because they did not grasp what Jesus really meant. He had to tell them plainly that Lazarus was dead in order for them to understand. Jesus determined. Verse 15. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Verse 16. Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, Let us also go that we may die with him. Glad. John 11:15. Jesus said he was glad for the disciples' sake that he had not been there in time to save Lazarus, because this would now be an opportunity for them to strengthen their faith in him. If Jesus had been with Lazarus during the final moments of Lazarus' sickness, he might have healed him rather than let him die. But Lazarus died so that Jesus' power over death could be shown to his disciples and others. Jesus' determination to return to Bethany is seen in his words, "Let us go unto him." He needed to be there in order to perform the greatest miracles of 7 miracles as presented in John's gospel. And the disciples needed to be there to see it happen. Jesus was not glad Lazarus had died, but only that the disciples would now be witnesses to the glory of God's kingdom that would be manifested when he brought life out of death. The miracle would mirror how the gospel brings those who are spiritually dead to eternal life. Doubt. John 11:16. Thomas's response shows that his fears had devolved into resignation and apathy. The name Thomas is Aramaic. In Aramaic means twin, as does the Greek equivalent Didymus. But we do not know anything about his twin. Thomas's propensity for pessimism and doubt is evident when he makes the sarcastic comment that they should all go along so that they might all die along with Jesus. But we should give him credit for remaining loyal and willing to follow Jesus no matter the cost. Questions. 1. In what town did this incident take place, and where was it located relative to Jerusalem? 2. Why had Jesus left Jerusalem, and what happened while he was away? 3. What was Jesus' response upon hearing Lazarus was sick? 4. If Jesus loved Lazarus and his sisters, why did he delay 2 days before going to help them? 5. How did the disciples react when Jesus said they were going to Judea? 6. What seemingly unconnected rhetorical question did Jesus ask? 7. How did he explain his question? 8. What was the real meaning in his explanation, and what does this mean to us? 9. What did the disciples not understand about what Jesus said, and how did he clarify? 10. Why did Jesus let Lazarus die? This concludes the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, February 14th, 2021. Thank you for listening. God bless.